Aperture Priority Show number 14, Effects of Social Media on Photography.
Welcome to the Aperture Priority Podcast, an Avila Studios production where it's all about photography and fun. Now open up that aperture and let some creative light in.
Great. Welcome back to Aperture Priority Show number 14. I've been on a break, had school break, and unfortunately, a lady I worked with for a decade at Jostens art department passed away tragically. But now we're off to a new year, and we got a new show. And with me again today is Mr. Joe Engelbert.
And hello there, Tony. Sorry to hear about the passing of your friend, and it has been a while. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, great. We had also during the break, we had a great trip that we went up to Yosemite.
We had a wonderful day. We were chasing the snow, and while there wasn't any freshly fallen snow on the trees as we had hoped, we were trying to follow the weather forecasts, and those can be particularly fickle. But we had a wonderful day.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's the first time I've been up to Yosemite in the winter, and I enjoyed it. It's one of the first times I've actually been to Yosemite where I'm not, I feel like I'm in LA, where there's everybody in the world there. I enjoyed the day, cold, but heck, you make the most of it.
True. And for those of you that may not understand, usually Yosemite is packed year round, and in the winter, not as much, but because of the government shutdown and the bad publicity and stories about waste and trash, and which, by the way, we saw nothing like that there. It was a wonderful day because we had the park basically to ourselves with a few annoying people, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, it was great. Also, I got to meet a couple of photographers there that day. One gentleman was he from San Francisco or San Jose?
San Jose.
Great work. Well, he showed us his work. It was like one of our friends was looking at him like, "What? Are you a ringer?"
I mean, he said, "I've just started in the hobby. Learned later. It was like 18 years in the business." Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then another guy I liked. He modified his Fuji camera himself to do infrared.
Infrared. That was interesting, and he chased us around. We ran into him several times, and it was an interesting conversation. In fact, I was kind of inspired talking to him about taking one of my old D70s and converting it into an infrared. I'm going to get onto that.
Yeah, me too. The only thing is I do not trust myself with electronics. There is a place down south here in California. I think it's in San Diego, and they do these conversions. I'll try to find their information, put it on the show notes, but was a lot different perspective looking through an infrared.
Yes, it was. It really was. And I liked the look, and I've always admired that look, but that's something I need to get to look at. I might just do that before our next show.
Yeah. Probably for this coming Wednesday, I'm going to find some images, maybe bring to our photo group that I did shoot in infrared in an area as you go into the coast called Shandon.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps when you have a lot of green living things. It gives a glow and all your leaves turn white.
Right. It's very interesting.
Yes. So as we're off for a while, it's been pretty quiet on the news front. But I did check out some new things. I was kind of surprised that Nikon did release this Z 14 to 30 millimeter zoom. It's a f4 zoom. I thought the 58 0.95 Beast would be out before it.
They must have been in the works for some time, and they just came out of the conveyor line in that order, perhaps.
Yeah, and what I've seen of it, it looks great, and this could be a perfect little travel lens, like we were up there, because you don't need a 2.8 to shoot landscapes, really.
Not really, no.
Because you're going to stop down anyhow.
Exactly. You're going to be shooting f8, in that range.
Yeah, and so there's that. Now, Fujifilm did release, I just saw today, the GF. So this is for the medium format, a 100 to 200 5.6, and bear with me, it's a LMOISWR lens. I wish they would get these camera companies would kind of simplify the naming convention, because it's the equivalent of a 79 to 158 zoom, and also 5.6 on a medium format. I think it's like the equivalent of a f4 kind of speak if you're looking through a regular 35 millimeter crop
perspective. Yeah.
And then Olympus announced something. Now, I do not know much about Micro Four Thirds. I have a couple of friends that used to shoot, but they no longer shoot Micro Four Thirds. And also now that, Panasonic is now going full frame, you know, with all these different formats, I'm curious to see what the future is going to hold for these Micro Four Third cameras.
Right. And that's quite a beast of a camera, that the new Olympus. It has a motor-driven, built-in motor-driven advance, right, for the shutter?
I believe so. Yeah, there were. There's so many articles on it. That's what kind of caught me off guard. But one thing I wish, it's the Olympus OMD E-M1X. Just call it like the MX or something.
Right.
You know, it's so many of these names, you know.
That's like Nikon does a great job. D50, D100, D850. You know, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's D for digital.
Yeah, and
So that's what's also kind of what I've seen in new gear. There's a lot of adapters, and I'm not going to go over for the Z system now for the Nikon. So you're starting to see a lot of third party.
I've noticed that.
So now on the Canon front, I haven't seen anything being released, but it's only a matter of time. You're going to have third party.
Right. Well, Metabones is there, of course, for a lot of that. And speaking of Canon, I noticed an interesting article that Canon Digital and DSLR were the number one seller in Japan last year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So I know Sony had taken a big chunk out of Canon's sales. I think they had moved in Japan. I think they moved into second over Nikon, I think, at one time. Until Nikon, of course, when they released the D850.
Right.
Yeah. So they're probably just leapfrogging.
So Canon's number one in Japan. And Sony's number one right now, digital, in the U.S. But Canon and Nikon are catching up quickly. And
that was interesting. Our friend Larry, he was talking about his trip to the Philippines, and he went there for, I guess, a wedding, and how the professional photographers over there are mainly Sony, which was interesting.
Part of the reason he gave is that, they're light and for travel photography and urban photography. I think that footprint's really a nice size. It's inconspicuous. So if you're concerned about safety, it's an inconspicuous or slightly less conspicuous camera to be toting around.
Right. Instead of a bulky, thick DSLR. Right. Yeah. So let's see questions. I think we had a question about ND filters.
Well, right. One of the members of our group, Felix, asked about the use of ND filters, and we all use ND filters famously for slowing down water, lengthening that shutter speed so we can get that nice frothy, silky look on rapids and waterfalls. But he was asking about other uses for ND filters, and that's something that you've done recently in some of your posts in a stationary landscape. And he was asking about why and how you used your ND filter in that landscape.
Yeah, there's a shot I just took recently that a couple of my former students asked. They said, "Hey, that's a Mac OS background," and it was, of course, the iconic tonal view of Yosemite.
Yeah, the Yosemite Valley. But your picture didn't have the hard drive icon on it.
Right. That's another inside joke to another friend, and I showed him the same picture, and he goes, "You're never going to let me live it down." But why I used it, as the sun was setting, I got a 25-second exposure, and I was using an ND6. And I switched to a company called Breakthrough Photography. When I did my research, their name came up as number 2 or number 1 or number 2 in everything I read.
In the ratings.
And one of the biggest,
reviews,
was because they're very neutral. There's no color cast. And the reason I used it on that 25-second exposure, you're going to get a little bit different look with that ND filter. And also, the clouds are moving. So when I open up the file, and it was, I shot that with a Nikon D800, and of course I bring it up to Photoshop. It's a 16-bit file, so it's pretty big. You zoom in, the clouds are a little soft because they were moving.
Ever so slightly, yeah.
So that really makes the image pop out more. It gives it this depth.
Because the cliffs were in sharp focus and they had a blurry background.
Right. And the colors, and I would say make sure you get a good brand that there's no color cast. It kind of pops out your colors a little bit more. And
that is why you would want no cast, because, I can hear someone thinking, well, I can just fix that in Photoshop. Color cast, just do a white balance correction, but you won't have that vibrancy of color on the front end.
And that's why it's a good idea to get a good brand. There's another brand. It's made here in California. I think it's something wine country. I'll have to put in it's a great system. It's a pricey system. You may be looking, well over $1,000 just for the whole set. I hear good things about it, but I guess it's what you pay for. I think on both of mine, one was $159, the other one was $179
for an ND6.
Yeah, 6 and 10 stop,
like a 77 millimeter or something like that.
Exactly. I got it 77. I thought about getting the square 100. Mm-hmm. But I thought, well, then I have to get the mounting system. And I thought, okay, just for now,
back to Koken.
Yeah. Look at your biggest thread, which is 77 millimeter, and just get an adapter rings. I got plenty of adapter rings.
Got it.
So that's what I did. And it worked out. So it works out for slowing down, that water. And as we were saying, that's smooth and all of that. And if you ever do an evening shot, where you could do maybe more than maybe a 30+ second, if you get some clouds in the skies, the sunset, it really just turns, really, it gives it a nice, almost surreal look to your image.
All right.
So let's move into today's subject, and it's the effects of social media on photography.
Well, social media, what's that?
Yeah. Well, doing the research on this, everywhere I've looked, it's like, if you're a photographer in today's world, you're going to use the number one is still Facebook, YouTube, then Instagram. And surprisingly, when I was going down the list, Flickr it's there, but it's like,
it's sliding down.
It's sliding down, and it's like, wow, at one time it was kind of a neat.
It was the hot one.
LinkedIn was in there, and I guess for business aspect, you would see that. But that was the one thing where, as a photographer, you need to be savvy in social media to put yourself out there.
I was just attended a conference, workshop on social media's impact, or the use of social media for your business and photography, and it was a very interesting workshop, and it's a moving target. Facebook has changed their algorithms, and Facebook now owns Instagram. And so this is a moving target, and the answer is, if you dive into that pool, be prepared to keep up with it. And doing the research, I was just finished writing an article called "Has Instagram Killed Photography?" And it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but a little serious too, because there's some serious issues with Instagram and social media's impact on photography. and sort of a good, bad, and ugly story, if you will. The good part is that social media has spawned an entire generation of people getting interested in photography. The proliferation of cell phones has made photography available to everyone, and it's an ever evolving art form, profession, career, hobby, if you will. It wasn't so long ago we were lugging around cameras made out of wood, and in terms of technology, and now we're evolved into these cell phones. The explosion of Instagram in particular, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The good part is, again, the proliferation, and it's propelled some photographers into stardom that were unknown. So it's a very good platform for exposing your work and getting your creativity out there. But the bad part about Instagram is something to do with the way that the photographers themselves have impacted the environment. And there are areas of the country that were obscure and local favorites of photographers that were very picturesque. And they would take a picture of this local phenomena, this landscape or whatever, and they'd make it famous. And before you know it, people from all over the world were knocking down the doors of that area. Our motto in photography is, take nothing but pictures, kill nothing but time, and leave nothing but footprints, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the thing I want to reiterate is as a photographer, I want to leave nothing but footprints, and I want to take nothing but a photo and kill nothing but time. I am stunned in my own personal experiences about how a place popularity has been absolutely destroyed the environment. Case in point, I read one story yesterday about a photographer in Australia that had a favorite place. It was a railroad, an abandoned railroad tunnel. It was a neat place, but inside the tunnel there was a colony of glowworms, and so he took pictures of them, and their popularity exploded. And photographers were going in there with flashes and burning wool and flares and smoke bombs, and they decimated the colony. And the owner of the tunnel fenced it off and said, no more. They ruined the site. And Horseshoe Bend on the Colorado River is another example. They're putting up a fence to keep people away from that iconic view because they were destroying it. And here in Yosemite, in California, Yosemite, just last month, we had a couple, an Instagram influencers, fall to their death off a cliff in Yosemite because they were taking selfies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the bad part. And I'll get to the ugly. I'll let you chime in here.
And it's funny you brought that in. When we were photographing towards the end of the day there in Yosemite, as we were getting that sunset shot, I was surprised how many, I'm not surprised how many people are there. I met a girl from Australia, a couple of girls from Germany, but some of these people were jumping up on that ledge and taking selfies. And I was like, wow, that fall is not going to be that bad of a fall, but it'd
be a trip to the hospital.
It's become the norm where you got to go jump up on something and say, look at me, you know, instead of just doing what the sane people are doing is when you see somebody with a camera, they came up to me and said, hey, you looks like you know what you're doing. Could you take a picture? But there's another, there was a place here at the coast when you mentioned the burning wool.
Right.
It was here in California that there was some kind of
steel wool.
Yeah, that steel wool where they do the fire thing that they set a boat. It was a boat wreck along the shore, famous little thing, and they set the boat on fire.
And ruin it for everybody else.
And when I'm seeing that too, there's a local place here in Yoko Valley I used to photograph in, but now everybody started going out there because one guy asked me, well, where do you take that picture at? And I showed him. Well, pretty soon everybody's going out there. And now when I go out there, there's these signs, no trespassing. They're having multiple problems, trespassing, poachers, and people with shotguns are just shooting up the fences. So the ranchers, I should say, are just say, hey, enough is enough.
And graffiti.
Yeah, graffiti.
On the rocks.
On the rocks. So it's an unfortunate thing. When I shot the Supermoon a couple of years back, I was shocked how many photographers were out there. Which right. One time was
it was you and the cows.
Yeah, that was it. And the funny story, when I was photographing that night, you get to a certain area, there's no cell service.
Mm-hmm.
So I was setting up at one spot, but then everybody was saying, hey, photographers here. Then it's like where there was just 4 of us, there was like 20 of us. So finally, I got annoyed by one local photographer. He came and parked his car really right in front of our view. And we all looked at him and said, do you mind moving your car? And he looked back and said, why? And he kept walking forward. And I thought, well, that's rude.
Right.
So we just packed up. Instead of getting into him, we went to my local spot. Well, guess the night before I was out there photographing, a model friend of mine, Jenna, and we were doing this haunting look. It was really eerie out there. Well, I forgot one of my reflectors out there.
Mm.
And I thought, I'll never find it. When I pulled up and parked, there was like 20 people here again. And my friend Johnny was out there and he walks up to me and goes, hey, Tony, did you leave this out here? But it was like, well, there's no private, and I could see these ranchers getting annoyed now because people are going to, they're tagging them. They're putting graffiti. They're shooting up their fences. So, and this is kind of bad reflection then on photographers. Another thing I've seen, it's the famous archway in is it Moab? I know it's in Utah.
In Arches National Park.
Yeah. And there's a shot where for some reason it was either the time of year to shoot. Well, I'm looking at, there's like 30 guys out there with tripods.
Yeah.
And after a while, I'm afraid that there's going to come a day when you walk into a national park and you got a tripod, you're going to be either asked to pay an extra fee. I think there is kind of that now, but I think over time, especially if people start messing things up, they're going to say, hey, you need to pay because, this is getting messed up or whatever.
Exactly. And so that, the other part about the Instagram, it leads into the third point, the ugly part about it is that, we have a new breed of photographer, and it seems to be the person who is chasing a particular kind of image because they know that they're trying to be popular on Instagram. They're chasing the likes, whether it's Facebook or Instagram. And so they force the issue by finding someone that's popular and emulating their style. And so they're, in a sense, they're losing creativity, which if they're persistent, it can even lead to depression. And I know photographers who are depressed because they're not getting enough likes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even had some photographers that they quit the business because they didn't get enough likes, and that is a direct result of chasing the popularity. So I want to reemphasize that if photographers, let's pick up after ourselves. Let's leave nothing but footprints, and let's keep it better than we found it. And I can only stress enough that we want to hand this wonderful craft and art form off to the next generation. Then we need to take care of our environment and the reputation of the industry.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring up. There's I have a philosophy. Everything there's yin and yang, and I'm going to start with yin, the bad part. I want to finish off with something positive. But as an instructor here at the local JC, social media impacts how class time. I warned my students the very first day because I'm on the campus here in Tulare, and the main campus is in Visalia for the College of the Sequoias. So you're going to drive an extra 10 miles to come to my class.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just going to come to be on social media, you're going to be on Facebook and everything. I tell them, why bother? Just stay, get your free Wi-Fi and stay on the main campus.
Right.
Why are you coming all the way out here? If you're not going to learn anything, you're just burning gas money, or your parents have to take you, you have to catch the bus. And it's also, it impacts how, I teach, and I've come to the point anymore. I just tell my students, it's on you. If you want to be on social media, you have to see your friend's Snapchat. Shouldn't you be studying? Well, this has also affected. Sometimes I've been asked by other photographers. We'll go out and we'll do like a learning, like on lighting, because I've done so much outdoor flash photography.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem is I'm setting up, instead of them watching me what I'm actually doing, they're taking pictures, selfies of me work, and it's like, you're not learning what I said.
Oh, you're so old school.
Yeah. And I have noticed when I go, like when we went on the trip to Yosemite, part of the fun is the adventure, going out and taking the photograph, getting that capture. But I've noticed with certain people, the adventure is just doing the selfie, not so much the actual photography. Then they want to zoom home and upload it. Hey, this is what I did today. Instead of actually working on the capture itself, then bring it into Lightroom, wherever you work in, to bring out that image to show what was your vision. They're more interested in just getting somewhere, because some of the areas I go to, there's no connection. So they can't post. So it's almost like a disease, like a junkie, like I have to get Wi-Fi somewhere where I'm going to put this image up.
Right.
And it just boggles my mind.
And it goes back to that issue of depression I was talking about, because study after study has shown that social media is a catalyst. When you don't get enough likes or responses, it's that fear of missing out experience that marketing has been so brilliant and effectively communicating to this generation.
It's almost like going back to like when you were in junior high or high school. Am I going to be the popular kid?
That's what it is. It's a popularity contest. I use the analogy that back in the day, we would socialize before cell phones, and we would name drop. Well, and we would talk about our connections and our friendships. And if we were really being snotty about it, we'd talk about, we'd name drop. Well, I know so-and-so that's famous and what have you. Now we photo drop. We've been to all these iconic places. Here I am in front of the Eiffel Tower. Here I am in front of the Taj Mahal. Here I am in front of the Yosemite Valley.
It's me.
It's a really point in the selfies, those poses that you were talking about on the ledge, that really just reflects this generation's obsession with the same thing other generations have had, is seeking popularity. So I can't fault them or us. It's amusing because it's done in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using a tool that I have a particular fondness for, the camera. And that's fine and well and good, as long as we can remember that the subject matter, if it's you, fine, that's great. Me, I don't want to see my ugly mug anymore. I'm pretty much past that.
Yeah, I just don't. Again, if we're going out, I don't care about being pictured like, ooh, there's Tony setting up the light. It was so bad. My friend Johnny would post me always with my light meter, and my friend Cindy, she lives up in Fresno. She messaged me one day. She goes, "What the hell's that thing you got in your hand? Why is it so important?" And I go, "It's a light meter."
A light meter, yeah.
And she goes, "What does it do?" And I told her, she says, "Well, why is it so important to have your picture taken?" And I said, "I do not take my picture. Somebody else is doing it."
Right.
Instead of actually watching why I'm metering the way. But
Yes.
It is. Another thing I did not like about some of the negative social media aspects, I kept getting put in these groups on Facebook, local photo groups. And boy, you talk all about the ego and how some people talk. And that's the problem, because you're not talking face to face, and how they would go off on each other. And it's almost like they're being bullies to other people in the group. And that negative aspect I didn't care for. I'd try to go in and there was a plus and minus too, in that I would give my advice. And I was surprised how many people are shooting professionally that really don't know what they're doing. And they would ask me, what do you think? What do you think of my editing? And I'd say, I would look at composition, and also use fill flash. And like, why would I use fill flash? I only shoot natural light. And it's like, well, you would fill your subject and your back wouldn't be blown out white. But I just got to the point. It's like, well, okay, now everybody's a professional, and now they're saying, look at me. And that doesn't amuse me. I don't feed off of that. I rather spend my time, and I'm terrible about posting. I'm more about going out to the adventure and the capture. That's what I like. Afterwards, I'd say, hey, yeah, this is what I did. I got this capture, and that's fine. I don't want to focus because there's too much in the media that's negative. Why keep feeding into it? Go out and do something creative.
And to me, that underscores my motivation for being involved in photography, is because it feeds my soul. I enjoy the beauty that surrounds me, and I'm teaching, and I've been taught to look at the world differently through the years because of the camera. And that's one of the good things about social media too, is because it has encouraged a whole mass of people to look at the world differently and to notice the beauty around them. And that's a very positive thing. It's when we start comparing ourselves to other photographers and saying things like, well, that photographer, she has 75,000 followers, so whatever she's doing is working. So I'm going to copy her work and make her style my style. Now, in the beginning, imitation is a way of learning. I get that. But just to seek after those likes and those followers, I don't think that's healthy, because that ends up with the comparison, because you'll never measure up in that regard.
Now, on the positive side, one great thing about social media, I found photographers, both on YouTube and other means, that I look at their work as more inspiring.
Right. Right. I've seen images that I want to go out and capture that feel or that scene, not necessarily identical in their style, but it inspires me.
Inspires. There's, I wish I could think of his name right now. I'll try to find his name. He's originally from Italy. He lives here in Northern California, and I love his YouTube posts. He's great attitude, and his flair for life is great. He shoots, and he says, hey, this is what I use, and this is what he does. And it's inspiring. There's another guy I like. His name's Ted Vieira. He's from, I believe, the Las Vegas area. And he used to shoot Fuji. I think he still does, but he does a lot of black and white, and he's got a great street view. And you listen to him, and it's like listening to these two photographers talk. It's the passion.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. So, and even though I do not shoot street photography, I love his black and white work. This Ted Vieira, great work. I love to hear his passion. I like to see his work. Mm-hmm. That's inspiring.
Inspiration, right. And that doesn't mean you're going to become Ted.
Right.
But you are inspired by it to go out and do your best.
Exactly. And when you have people with the enthusiasm and the passion, it kind of brings up your A game.
Yes.
It's kind of like, not to be facetious, it's like on our trip, I know a couple of our colleagues left early, and I knew the reaction when we'd post our work, in a fun gist. It's like, well, gee, you left early. That was just too bad.
That's too bad. Yeah.
Yeah, you could have got this. It's all in the fun way to have fun on social media, but it's not this like, oh yeah, you don't know anything,
right. type
of thing. Where learning and watching the videos of this guy from Northern California inspired me to pick up a couple of pieces of gear that I did a panoramic up in Yosemite. Very simple setup. I didn't pay out the nose to get some of these very expensive panoramic setups. I did my research. I got the gear. And what did I do? I got it out to go use it, go experiment. And I experimented first at the coast. I did good with my first panoramic. I didn't have any issues. Then I tried it that day. And a lot of people saying, wow. And they said, well, what'd you use? I used the 50 millimeter. And they go, oh. And they were like, you mean you didn't use the wide angle? No, I said, use the 50 millimeter vertically and panned, and it stitched perfectly.
Right.
And so again, it's because I found somebody on YouTube. And I follow him on Instagram, and I was able to get a look that I wanted for myself.
Right.
And I used the lens because I like a low element count lens to get these rich black and whites. And I think I got it, and I'm going to make a print out of it because I like the way it came out.
Right.
But I used the social media out to look at sources saying, hey, what's worked for them? How can I put this in my workflow as gear to make this type of panoramic?
Right.
And I'm not copying, let's say, for their style, because I shot this in black and white. And, I got some people telling me, calling me Ansel Adams. So it's like, hey, that's inspiration, but I'm no close to that. But there's a reason why I use the internet, social media to find what I need to get inspired, and not to get into all this gear, because that's another thing about some of these YouTube photographers. They're sponsored by people, and I think some of the stuff they can mislead about this gear,
right, and to sell it, right,
and sell it, and it's almost clickbait. It's like you'll hear why I switched to Nikon to Fuji, then they're back to Nikon. Now I'm switching to Canon, and then you kind of click, and then they're back to Nikon again. It's like, well. Think of those photographers who followed you, who went and bought Fuji, and they're like, well, what the H?
Yeah, chasing the dollars.
Yeah. And now you're back to Canon, and now you're like, then you go back to Nikon. So you're kind of jumping all over the place, and you got to think, what if people believed you and went out and bought this stuff, your recommendation? The next thing you know, you're throwing that company under the bus.
And that's one of the unfortunate aspects of social media. And so it's a mixed bag, yin yang. We all know photographers that have actually are consumed with that voracious beast, Instagram, where they are successful. They develop the followers. Now they got to keep it up. So their whole lifestyle becomes chasing the image. And we've read and heard of famous people that have stopped the treadmill because it's all consuming to keep that up, to keep up that facade.
Exactly. And I mean, and I just can't tell you, I wish people would just put down the cell phone just for a bit, and go out and, and take that photograph.
Unless you're listening to the podcast on a cell phone, just a few more minutes longer.
And take your earbuds, you can drive, you don't have to look at the screen.
Right.
So, I mean, again, there's yin and yang, but I focus more on the positive. That's what I get out of the social media. And sometimes I get my friend, oh, did you see this photographer went on so-and-so on Twitter, showed him and her or whatever. It's like, I'm not into somebody's drama on the internet.
No.
Yeah, it's more to me. It's
and it's not junior high.
Yes, that is true. Oh, I think that was a very good conversation. We'll see what kind of reaction we get.
Right, I'm sure we stepped on somebody's toes.
Well, yeah, and it's again. I look at it. We're in a show me profession, if you think about it.
Right.
We're showing people our work.
Yes. And we want feedback.
We want feedback.
Sure.
I think some other people want the feedback more for the ego part of it.
What are you feeding with your photography? What are you feeding?
And it's like, are you in it for the passion, or are you in it again for the likes?
Right.
And if that's what they want, hey, more power to you.
Yep.
But I look at it, it's like anything, life or anything. Look at it as an adventure and step out and explore.
Right.
Explore, do something. And again, you find your niche and you find people who you will follow that are going to be inspiring, instead of saying, oh, that no good son of a gun, he did this and he switched and he's full of crap. And, and if you, and then you click on, well, which person are they talking about? You know what I mean? Then you're going down the rat hole. Go to the light. Be a Jedi.
Unfollow.
Yeah. Be the Jedi Knight. Don't go to the dark side.
Got it.
Well, I think that was a good conversation for today. Yeah. So, Joe, where can we find you?
Well, I after this conversation, I'm deleting all my social media accounts. But until then, you can find me at Facebook at Bright Angel Images on Facebook, or on Instagram, Bright Angel _images. Also, I have a website, brightangelimages.com, and that's the company. And that's where you can find me.
Oh, great. You can find me here at AvilaStudios.com. Also on Facebook. I have the Aperture Priority Podcast. Of course, Tony Avila 64 on Instagram. So I'm going to keep those accounts for at least when I get my new posts up, because I haven't posted there in a while. And I just want to leave off for everybody to go out and open up that aperture and let that creative light in.
Aperture Priority is an Avila Studios production. For more information on what Avila Studios has to offer, please visit us on the World Wide Web at avilastudios.com.